Who is lying about the interest rates? I'm Bill Gross. This is my weekly real estate market update. And if you've been following me, the news at all for months, you've seen in the business news this story about the federal government saying more jobs, more jobs, more jobs. Oops, about a month ago. We were wrong by 1 million jobs, meaning all of the job increases of the last year were a math mistake. Now we have departments of people in the federal government. We have a building probably dedicated to counting the number of jobs. That's their sole job, and they got that wrong. Now we have interest rates. It's really amazing to me that we've been talking about cutting interest rates, cutting interest rates. If you read the business news, that's all they talk about, the Fed Reserve, will they cut, won't they cut? I will admit, I was off on a religious holiday, Thursday and Friday, and I looked at the news Saturday night, and not only did rates go up about, not quite 0.5%, about 0.3%, there's no news on the subject. How can that be? So before we get into that, let's reset the market, make sure we know where we are, and then we'll talk about what's happened and who's lying to who about this. In any economy, there's two things. There's supply and demand. Supply are the number of things available for sale. Demand is the buyers looking to buy, and we measure demand in our mortgage market, in our home buying market by interest rates. That's what drives the demand. And here you can see that last week, look at this graph for last, all of the spring and summer rates coming down, and boop, 6.53. We went from 6.26 on Thursday to 6.53. That's a 0.33% increase in one day. That's about almost a 0.4% increase from a couple weeks ago. You can see it reverses all of this gain of the last, summertime, let's say, and puts us back into where we were. So for the last few months, the last month or two at least, we've been saying great is the economy is getting better for home buyers, rates are down, you can afford to buy more property, and oops, not true. Interest rates jump back up, and I think what you're gonna find is lenders who promised low rates and didn't lock them in. That's a game they play. Now we're gonna have to deliver a higher rate, and you can have problems. You're gonna have escrows falling out, buyers disappointed, because this has major effects. So you can see increase in rates. This is gonna take a couple weeks to feel through the market. So the data is not yet set. Now on the supply side, homes for sale have been dropping steadily. We've been noticing this trend now for a while. We're at 625,000 homes for sale, which is more than last year's 543, less than the pre-pandemic years of 800,000, 900,000 or more. And so we still have, by any historical standards, very low inventory, still affected by the COVID, by the government takeover of the entire real estate industry and the economy. And so you can see kind of this abnormal thing where last year the inventory was rising slightly, now it's dropping slightly. They're about the same as they were. I think that's where we're headed to in the next period of time. As long as inventory is low, you can have dramatic housing prices, but watch inventory as a result of the rate increase. If that turns around, that will change everything. So we have to kind of keep a close eye on that going forward. Now, real estate is a local business, and locally in Los Angeles, the market, again, as of through last week, still a seller's market, but marginally so. It's been in that range now for 4 weeks. And at 37, this is Altos Research, which combines all these factors into one number. I think they do a great job. You can see that we've been declining from a seller's market of 41, that was in June, slowly down to a 37. And what this has done is tell us that the market has been more normalizing. But again, with a rise in rates, we might see a quickening of that pace, and we might move more towards an even market, or maybe even a buyer's market here in Los Angeles. So stay tuned for those details. So again, the local market and the details is changing and is really important. Okay, so last week, let's go back to the news. Last week, the federal government announced job rising. 250,000 more jobs, 100,000 more than expected. The economy expected 150. Now, these are the same experts that watched the government lie to them for a year and then were surprised when the government fixed it with no explanation as to how. How can you have thousands of people whose sole job in life is to count the number of employees get it wrong? We still don't have an explanation. Nobody was fired over that. Nobody was demoted over that. There's been no explanation as to why. There's no inquiry at the governmental level. How can you be misleading us about the most important government statistics all year long? And I thought a great title of an article from Mortgage News Daily, who lied about the job numbers? We still don't know, right? I think what we do know is we're in a election season. And what we do know is that the government is doing what it can to justify its continued power over our economy. So who lied about the job numbers? Well, if we know the job numbers are put out by the government, the obvious answer is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. If you remember, I had a week or two ago the interview from the Secretary of Commerce. She was a former, I think, governor of Rhode Island. And when asked about the job numbers corrections, she said she wasn't following it. So these people don't even pretend to tell you the truth anymore. So we had this job jump of 250,000 jobs, which might be good news. And of course, the politicians use that in the debate, and they use that in their advertisements to say, aren't things great? There's more jobs than before. The problem is that puts pressure on the economy because businesses had thought rates would be coming down because the economy was slow. And if the government is, on one hand, lying and saying jobs are good, then on the other hand, the penalty they pay is the economy is not slowing, so rates should go up in an inflationary economy. What's fascinating was I was off Thursday and Friday, as I mentioned, so I searched online to see where the news was. I looked at the Wall Street Journal and what they had to say about this. Curiously, nowhere really on the top of the page at all. Now, you can dig through, and they do talk about their interest rate drops, but that should be major news. An interest rate potential drop of 0.25% is a headline every day, but here the rate's actually going up is irrelevant to the Wall Street Journal. That's curious. I looked at CNN Business, more of a consumer side, and again, no topic about the jump in interest rates. Yes, they have the rates posted somewhere, but they don't actually talk about what should be big news, which is interest rates drop. They have the economy getting better, right? Supposedly robust growth. Not that, are they lying to us again? Nobody asked that question. Don't ask that question. Are they lying to us again? But that robust growth, the price was, the interest rates rose, and nobody even asked that question. Why? Here you go. The job numbers surpassed everyone's expectation. Cue the complaints about the Fed. Don't even talk about the fact the Fed was going to lower rates. I did a Google search, interestingly enough, on interest rates. I limited it to the past week. Interesting how nobody even covered the jump in rates. It's not even a story, apparently. Now, I do have this from the White House. Lower rates are good for business. So they keep the lower rates article up, but rates actually went up. So that doesn't even apply anymore. Here, NerdWallet has mortgage rates this week from 3 days ago. Oops, I lost my spot there. So it's not even in the news. What is going on? Who's lying to us? Well, the answer is, I think the whole system is lying to us. Because if a Google search doesn't even show news covering the topic, the government is taking credit for low rates, yet they're not getting the price being paid for high rates, which is inflation. If the government is claiming the benefit of high jobs, but isn't being held accountable for lying about jobs for a year, obviously something's going on here. Let's just use our eyes here, pay attention, and stop being misled and stop falling for this. So again, I think the whole thing, who's being lied to? We're all being lied to. Who's doing the lying? I think the federal government at its deepest, most corrupt level is lying about jobs, interest rates. I wouldn't believe any information other than the information I see with my eyes. Real businesses, real economies, and real numbers. That's how I would take it. Now, elsewhere in the news, a little piece of good news. They can't help. I don't think they really want to put this article out there, but they do. This is from Yahoo Finance. And it basically kind of justifies owning houses. Millennials are house rich. How one generation doubled their wealth. What they're saying is that those millennials that bought houses have really benefited. Why is that? Well, we're in an inflationary period. We might be in runaway inflation if things don't change. And so the best investment to hedge against inflation traditionally has been real estate. Not only does it go up with the inflation, but it's a leveraged play. You put 10% down, you get 10 times your impact on the asset. And so this documents the number of millennials, 28 to 43, who've seen their net worth double because they were able to squeeze into a house 5 years ago and have rode the inflationary horse up higher and benefit from it. And so in some ways, this is an indictment because you think the solution would be get more people into owning homes, and that would help more people build their wealth. I think so. That makes sense to me. A kind of a grim statistic that came out, I didn't realize really how bad things are. Now, I've been in business since 1984. Here's a statistic from Mike Dopret, who's a professor of real estate, showing every year's home sales since 2012. What you notice is the lowest number of homes sold, these are existing homes, not new homes, since 2012. And what's crazy is our country has added 20 million more residents, and yet we're selling 150,000, 200,000 less homes. How can that be? Like, where do people live? It's not that we have bigger families, it's the opposite. We have smaller families. We have less families formed, more single people, and the average family formed has less children. And so really that number even belies it even more. How can it be we have less homes than we had 12 years ago? If there's one number that shows the abject failure of state, federal, and governmental and national policy on housing, this is it. The lack of available housing. We don't even have the ability to put people in houses is obviously a factor. And then you add to that we bring in 20 million people from around the world, and that only makes things more difficult. To add to that, because of the higher taxes and the lack of availability of new homes, what else happens is homes don't turn over as much. And here you have an article from Business Insider. And again, I don't think they realize they're showing the fallacy of their arguments, but homes now sell on average once every 20 years. When I started in real estate, it was every 10 years. And what does that mean? Well, it means it used to be people had starter homes. They'd buy a house, maybe it was a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. And as they built wealth and the family grew, they'd buy a 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom and grow into it. Now, it seems to me the only people with 5-bedroom homes are larger, are wealthy people, and many times singles who have huge parties and huge entertainment needs. But what's clearly happening in America is no longer people moving from a smaller home to a mid-sized home to a final home. And as a result, they're staying in the same home for 20 years. The taxes on homes in California, we have taxes and fees and city and county taxes, and then of course mansion taxes. So it's harder and harder to sell homes. As a result, less people are doing it, and then that creates more pressure on prices on the fewer homes in existence. So what does our government do? Well, I'm in California, and Gavin Newsom, I think I documented last week, signed 32 new laws on housing, as if he read any of them. One of them, if you want to talk about complete moronic government policies, is now we give tenants 10 days notice instead of 5 days notice that they didn't pay their rent. Now, I don't know about you, but back in the days when I was paying rent as a single guy, rent payment was like the biggest thing of the month. I mean, it was my biggest expense. It was tough to get over every month. You either dropped the check off in the mailbox, or you mailed it, or you put it in a little slot if you were in a project or a apartment building of some sort. People know when they don't pay their rent. The 10-day notice is not a reminder process to tell tenants. Landlords can have automatic postcards telling you, hey, it's the first where's my check. The 10-day notice is a legal standard saying you have to wait 10 days before you can notice the tenant, they're delinquent. Well, they know they're delinquent. They're just deadbeats. A good tenant at times has problems. Will call the landlord and say, hey, I'm having a problem. Can we work things out? I had to do that at times. I've had friends who did it recently. But extending the notice period of 5-10 days basically just steals the home from the landlord by 5 more days from a deadbeat tenant. Think about it. And the deadbeat tenant's not going to ever pay rent and force you to hire an attorney and do an eviction, and that's going to cost you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to get rid of them. On top of that, you just have another 5 days you lost because the state of California is sympathetic to tenants and is anti-landlords. And so that's all that is. It's really just a taking. You have the state government feeling that the property is really theirs to use for their benefit. Another policy that's being pushed in California is smaller properties. And there's this concept of small lot homes, which really look like apartments. You have like a 3 or 4 story building, and instead of on what might be normally one house lot, maybe a 6,000 square foot lot, they put four properties, 4 small lot subdivisions. Here's one that's 8 on a spot that used to have 2 houses. And so I can tell you, being in real estate, I have never had a customer ever say to me, my dream is to own a 3 or 4 story small square building next to 3 or 4 other neighbors so close that I could reach out the window and hit the side of the house. That's not what people want. But the government is building this so they can say they've built, in this case, 8 single family homes, when in reality, they built kind of 4 large condos. And of course, they're only building them close to Metro Rail, which nobody's riding. This is just part of the government taking land and forcing their agenda and forcing the destruction of what otherwise the American dream of owning a small home. Also in the news this week, in the section called, You Just Don't Hate These Big Corporations Enough. One of the companies that you should hate more than as many as any of them is Redfin. Here's Redfin, which is a company that I don't believe has ever paid federal taxes, probably doesn't pay much state taxes, as they disrupt realtors, which means they put out of business people who do pay taxes and do build our community. Redfin, which is a investment company owned by some venture capitalists, is gloating that the horrible National Association of Realtors settlement, which is disgraceful and anti-capitalist in every way. We have one, I'll repeat, I say this all the time, one judge, one jury, one courtroom, one plaintiff decision, basically, that disrupts the entire 100-year-old real estate industry. And Redfin is gloating because they want to destroy real estate agents. Thus create a new competitive ballgame. Now, this is a guy who's never really sold houses for a living. He's just some sort of techno guy. And then you read about what the changes are that they're bragging about. It says, as a result of the client action lawsuit, home sellers are no longer obligated to offer commission for both the buyer and the seller agents. Well, they never were obligated to do that. There were sellers who sold their own since I've been in business. There were sellers who didn't want to pay buyer's agents commissions as long as I've been in the business. There were sellers who didn't want to pay listing agent commissions as long as I've been in the business. That's not a result of the lawsuit. That's propaganda. The second point they make is some agents are talking to home sellers about the benefits of offering commissions to buyer's agents. Now, again, above it said they're no longer obligated as though it's a bad thing. And then now down below, Yahoo, propaganda arm of the government, it's a good thing that agents are talking about being able to pay commissions to buyer's agents. Well, which is it? And the last one, home buyers may need to take time to understand the agreement forms with potential agents. Now, it's only have to take time because the forms are so stupid. The forms are so complicated to avoid more lawsuits. And a recent study I talked about a couple weeks ago by, I think it was the University of Buffalo, the forms are not, understandable to the average buyer. So all we've done is create forms that nobody understands but sophisticated professionals. That obviously means they're taking advantage of the clients. So here you have Redfin basically bragging that you don't have to talk to buyer's agents, but you can talk to buyer's agents, and there's forms you have to sign that nobody understands. You just don't hate these large monopoly corporations enough, and Redfin is one of those that I hate as much as any of them. And then another case of propaganda. This one is kind of a dual propaganda. This is the Housing Wire, and then of course Yahoo Finance is the echo chamber of propaganda. Can my agent get a better deal than others? The data says probably not. So what the press loves, now these are people who are journalists who basically can't do anything in their lives, and so they just write articles knocking everybody else. Everybody else is stupid but them. So they want to say that real estate, and these are people who've never sold a house or bought a house for the most part. Can an agent get a better deal? Probably not, meaning the underlying context is, well, most agents are worthless. You're throwing your money away for commission. This is not true. It takes a professional like me to help you understand the stupidity of this data they cite. So there was a study done by the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, arm of the government. And what it says is some agents sell property below the list price that they listed for, some sell it closer to the list price, and some sell it for more than the list price. Now, because the Federal Reserve doesn't know anything about real estate, and then Housing Wire doesn't care, they just want to put anything negative about realtors, as does Yahoo, there's obviously different types of markets. I'm that kind of agent that I will list a house for a seller overpriced if that's giving service to my customer. I'll say to them, listen, I believe it's worth $1 million. You want to list it for $1.2 million? Let's go ahead and list it for $1.2 million as long as you understand where my opinion is, that you're doing this against my recommendation. I don't think it'll hurt you other than waste some time. And I'm willing to do that because it serves my customer. Some real estate agents say that's a mistake. They don't want to waste their time, the agent's time, by listing it. More importantly, some agents don't want to list it high because it makes them look bad as an agent. They want to list all their houses at the price they sell at. Well, that's using your marketing numbers to sell the next house. That's not serving your customer. Also, I deal with probate cases where sometimes we have multiple sellers, and in order to meet certain legal requirements, we have to list the price based on multiple heirs, or the court probate referee requires a certain price we have to sell it for, or at least try to sell it for. So what this does is takes data and says, oh, since there's variance, there must be good agents and bad agents, and the one who sell for closer to the list price are the good ones. It just shows the stupidity of Yahoo Finance and the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta to believe that demonstrates necessarily that agents are better than other agents. Now, does that mean there aren't good agents or bad? Of course there are. But it's more complicated than just how close to your list price on average is it. Is it an indicator? Yeah, it's a statistic. I always feel like when sellers ask me that number, I could print out all my sales and say, well, these are higher than list price for this reason, these are lower for this reason, and I can explain myself, and a seller can accept that explanation or not. But I don't believe that taking that data and saying that probably agents aren't worth their value, I think that's a mistake by both, I think, Yahoo Finance in this case and Housing Wire. So what do you think? What do you think about the jobs numbers? What do you think about the interest rate numbers? Are you being lied to? I think you are. Put your comments below. If you like this, like it, subscribe if you subscribe. If I can help with any questions on real estate, reach out. I'm at Bill Gross Probate on social media, BillGrossProbate.com for all my contact info. As always, make today your best day ever.